Chaos Effect, Chapter 1. A Michigander walks into a card shop. A rule of thumb, if any of you out there who wake up and find yourselves suddenly living in an anime, take stock before you panic. First off, determine what anime you are actually in. This is one of the most important things because, quite frankly, there are some anime where no matter who you are or what role you might be in, you're screwed. I don't know about you, but no amount of funny wires that let me run around buildings will ever make up for a world gone to hell and cannibal giants eating my loved ones. At least I assume that's what Attack on Titan is about. It might be about DC fans trying to get Teen Titans Go canceled for all I know. Now, maybe some of you really want to end up in one of those emo worlds where humanity is doomed and you know that half of the people you meet will be dead before it's all done because you want to live out your Hunger Games fantasies. Whatever floats your boat. Me, though? I openly admit I'm lazy and would much rather have an easy time of it. Now, if you are in an anime world that isn't one giant ball of suck, then I suggest you determine what you are in terms of character. Are you a main character? Or are you one of those random bystanders that's in the background? Because while it might sound neat to be in the Dragon Ball universe, you then might realize that you're just a normal human and your life is going to be a series of bland, oh my god, why? Oh, hello, King Yemen, nice desk. Live again, bland, rinse, repeat, cash the fucking check. I know a lot of people who end up stuck in those anime worlds with stands or sailing with Luffy think it's all great. But that's only because we don't hear about the ones that don't hit the jackpot when it comes to entering a fictional world because they die a painless death and don't get a chance to share their tale. Or at the very least don't get good reviews. Finally, check to see if you are yourself. Sometimes you get to keep your body. Sometimes you end up as Ass Ketchum. Ketchum? Keechum? Whatever. My point is that it matters too because it's going to make things a lot easier and a lot harder. I mean, yeah, it's really cool to suddenly be Ty from the Digidestin, but then you realize you've lost all muscle memory you used to have and your desire to punch that monkey radio host in the face is going to end up very badly. Ty wasn't a runner is all I'm saying. I'm personally glad I was younger when all this started with me. But I'm getting slightly ahead of myself. You need to think these things through before you panic. Because your magical adventure isn't going to be so awe-inspiring if you spend the entire time locked in a padded room while doctors decide if they should put the straitjacket on you before or after the enema. Now, I can't claim that I followed all these rules when I found myself stuck in my oh so wonderful odyssey. Yeah, I'd like to claim I was aloof and shit because that would make me sound all cool and a badass. But I gotta be honest with you guys, because you deserve that. And frankly, I hope that you guys laughing at me will get more comments and thumbs up. When I woke up, I was very startled. My bedroom wasn't huge by any means. Full-size bed, dresser, TV stand, nightstand. That was about it. But it was certainly bigger than the rice cracker box I found myself in that first morning I woke up in that strange world. I visit my dad's place a lot, so I'm used to waking up in a room that isn't my normal bedroom, but not in something that feels like a closet's bastard brother. My change in clothing didn't help either. Gone was the old t-shirt, a if you are a redneck shirt, if you must know, and silk pajama bottoms. And in their place was a set of pajamas you'd see a rich guy wearing in a cartoon right before Bugs Bunny popped up in his bedroom wondering if he should have taken that last turn at Albuquerque. You know the kind, the baby blue shirt with matching pants, a pair of heelless slippers sitting nearby. Sorry, I'm cheap, so there's no way I'm going to wear something like that. Yet there I was, in such an outfit. Hearing cars going by, I went to the window and opened it only to find my view that of an apartment building across a parking lot, only to be replaced by a Japanese skyline that stretched on for miles. Tall skyscrapers mixed with squat buildings, warehouses in the distance, with small leafy parks dotting the landscape before me. I could see an intersection of commerce, traffic, and humanity just to my left, with electronic billboards advertising the latest gadgets from Industrial Illusions and Kaiba Corp. Oh, shoot, I muttered to myself, it very quickly dawning on me that I had either finally cracked, which was a very good possibility, or ended up in the one thing I'd never wanted to be a part of, an author insert. Turning around, I began to pace, or at the very least, pace as well as I could in the refrigerator box that was my bedroom. I didn't know what to do with my hands, sometimes raising one to swoop my bangs back, other times letting my left arm fall behind my back and clutching my right. Oddly comfortable, I must say. It was only when I reached up to stroke my chin and found it bare that I realized it wasn't just my location that had changed. Ever since I had been 21 years old, I'd sported a full goatee at minimum. Even when I shaved the thing off, I always left a little bit of stubble. But rather than feeling the thick beard or a medium coarse stubble, it was smooth skin that greeted my fingertips. It took me a moment to shake the confusion of that out before I raced to the mirror, snatching up my glasses and plunking them on my face before I stared at myself. You ever wonder what you would look like if you were a cartoon character? I have. Those make yourself a insert TV show games are my favorite. DuckTales, My Little Pony, Pokemon, I've done them all. But it is one thing to design it on a computer, and it's another to find yourself staring at it in the mirror. My features were almost the same. Round face, blue-gray eyes, blonde hair, tall build. All the basics were there. But there were little changes that made it wrong, utterly off-putting. My chin was a little bit more square, my eyes bigger and more intense, lacking the gray lines that I normally saw on the irises. Skin flawless, not just missing blemishes, but no moles or pores either. I always had a mole just below the corner of my right eye, but that was gone, along with the one on my forehead. Glancing at my arm showed that the moles and freckles were gone too. Pulling up my plant legs proved that in the anime world I had silky smooth legs to apparently save the artist from time. That left my hairless self with only what was on top of my head. And God, that was the biggest change of all. Far longer than I would have ever worn it, and dark blonde now that had streaks of red that normally only showed up in my beard were now running along my hair like tiger stripes. I poked at my head, thankful that at the very least my hair was only at Seto Kaiba levels and not Joey or, God forbid, Yugi. Fudge, I muttered to myself before my face twisted in confusion. Fudge. Flicker. Flip. My nose crinkled as I snarled. I can't swear. I can't flopping swear. Gosh darn it in those mother-loving 4Kids copiers. I gripped the dresser and shook it in frustration. Oh, this is going to be a fluffy time. Can't wait to have my rice ball-shaped donuts. Grabbing my wallet off the small nightstand beside my bed, I found my driver's license, international in this world, so at least I could use a car, and stared at my anime self's picture. My birthday was the same, but a little math showed that I was only 22 years old in this world, meaning I'd lost nearly 13 years of my life. I still hailed from Michigan in the United States, though, and that gave me some hope that my family might exist in some form in this weird world. The problem was the name I found on my ID. Edwin J. Chaos. So, whoever sent me here decided to use my pen name, I thought to myself with a shake of my head. No idea where Edwin came from. I don't think I've ever established that Mr. Chaos's first name was that. I shut my eyes and sighed before I sang, "You're accepting this far too easily, Edwin." Scoffing, I decided I might as well explore this world, so I grabbed a t-shirt and some jeans, because damn it, I was not going to walk around in the anime world filled with ghost pharaohs and snake dick demons in my Uncle Scrooge pajamas. As I pulled out my socks, I grabbed my cell phone, only mildly surprised that it was there. And turning it on, I saw that I thankfully had my normal apps. If it was going to suck in this world, I could at least listen to some music. Once dressed, I took a breath, braced myself, and left the room. Scene break. Kipling Chaos, an older man in his 50s with graying hair that he tied back in a ponytail, warm brown eyes, and a round open face, looked up from his paper, shifting his wheelchair so that he could get around the corner to see his nephew coming down. "Ah, so good of you to join me for breakfast." "Hello, Uncle. That wasn't a clunky sentence at all," Edwin said, one side of his mouth quirking up as he walked over to the small open kitchen and pulled out a bowl and dumped some frosted mini-wheats into it. "What do we have planned today? Adventure? Romance? Egyptian pharaohs?" "Not quite like that, but perhaps some of the more basic stuff. Well, maybe a little adventure," Kipling said, turning his wheelchair so that his right leg, which was in a heavy white cast that left it sticking straight out in front of him, was tucked once more under the table. Edwin had, by this point, poured himself a glass of orange juice before sitting down to join him, eating his cereal dry and with his bare hands. "You have a horrible sense of table manners. And a garbage palate, I'm told," Edwin said cheekily. "What's up?" "I know you have been bored ever since you got here," Kipling said with a smile, watching his nephew eat. "I was the one to encourage you to take the year off after graduating from college and come stay with me and work at my television station, Chaos Communications. Again, rather clunky, but thanks, Uncle." He laughed at that. "Promised you would have all the sights and wonders of Domino, and the day before you arrive I trip on a candy bar and shatter my leg." He patted his cast. "Yeah, about that. How do you break your leg stepping on a candy bar wrapper?" You are never going to let me live that down. Still, no, seriously, you've done a great job for me so far at the station. I know you were hoping for far more reporting and less paperwork, but you've been a godsend. Got the file room cleaned up, actually gave us some organization. It's truly appreciated. It truly is. Edwin smiled at that. "No problem. You're welcome." "I very much am. I've been thinking about how I could reward you, and I think I know the way. Tell me, have you ever heard of Duel Monsters?" "Card game, right?" the younger man said, popping another bit of cereal in his mouth. "Exactly. I know it isn't that popular in America yet, but here in Japan it has gone from casual game to a cultural phenomenon. Everyone seems to be playing nowadays." "Really? I guess if football can become a national pastime, suppose I'll have to look into it, then, if I'll be staying here for a while." Kipling grinned and grabbed a large box that had been sitting near his own cereal box. "Oh, you'll be more involved with it, and far sooner than you think. You see, Edwin, I play the game myself. Began about 2 years ago, after doing some small puff piece on it when a reporter who was supposed to cover it caught the flu, but when it really took off last year, I began getting more and more involved. It's utterly addictive. Won a few tournaments, made a bit of a name for myself. I haven't been able to compete for the last few months, though, so I was, getting ready for your visit." "I'm sorry," Edwin said genuinely. "No need to feel bad." "I do, though," he retorted quickly. "You loved it, and I prevented you from playing it. I'm sorry." "You are more important than any game. You are my brother's son, Edward. Your family. That means so much more than anything in this world." "I know," Edwin whispered. "Believe me, I know." Kipling smiled at that before opening the box. "Now, I might have been out of the game, no pun intended, for the last few months, but that doesn't mean everyone forgot about me. I got this yesterday, but only just now I had a chance to look inside. Seems Industrial Illusions, the company that makes Duel Monsters, is holding some kind of special tournament." Edwin clearly perked up at that, and Kipling smiled, knowing that his nephew, even though he had just heard about the game, was already hooked. The way he leaned forward, the intense look in his eyes, his entire focus on his uncle. Oh yes, Edwin was drawn in. It made Kipling smile that he had something to share with his nephew. "And I do mean special. Maximilian Pegasus, the creator of Duel Monsters, is inviting all sorts of big names in the game to come to his island for a one-in-the-kind tournament. He's calling it," he paused, knowing that the tournament demanded a bit of dramatics, "Duelist Kingdom." "Lofty title," even loftier prizes. The title of King of Games and $3 million for the winner. Edwin let out a whistle, or as close as he could to one, as he always seemed to have his peter out. My thought exactly. He began to lay out the odd assortment of cards that arrived in the box. One had the picture of a ship, a very nice-looking yacht displayed on it. Another an island. A third a red glove that matched the actual one the box contained. There were two more cards, one with a pile of riches, the other a blank card with no writing on it. Edwin was especially interested in that one, staring at it for several moments before setting it down and picking up two metallic stars, no bigger than an American nickel each. Finally, there was a thick rule book that looked more like a pocket dictionary, though with a leather cover, an embossed logo of Industrial Illusions. Personally, I think Pegasus picked me out mainly because he wants good press. Short notice, Edwin said, scanning the letter. We got this last night, and it says the boat takes off tomorrow evening. Not sure how many people will be able to attend. Certainly not anyone who isn't in Japan already. My thoughts exactly. Edwin rubbed his chin. So either Pegasus didn't plan real well when it came to setting up this tournament. His lips twisted into a frown, and he looked over the top of his glasses at Kipling. Or Pegasus is up to something, and doesn't have time to wait. Kipling nodded in agreement. I consider the same thing. That's why I want to see what is going on that island. So what? We go and I push you around? Edwin asked. Kipling waved him off with a laugh. No, the tournament, according to this letter, will mostly take place outside. My wheelchair, it isn't built for rough terrain. No, I want you to go in my place. That sounds about right, he jested. Kipling was not quite getting what he was hinting at. Call to adventure, hero's journey. Think I'll skip denying the call bed and go right to the accepting. He rubbed his chin again, frowning a bit, though Kipling wasn't for sure why. Guess I need to buy some cards. Understanding his nephew's concern, Kipling wheeled away from the table and went over to his desk, pulling at a cord that hung around his neck, from which a key dangled. Unlocking the top drawer, Kipling reached inside and pulled out a small box before rolling back to his nephew. No, you won't. He placed the key and the box in Edwin's hand. This is my deck. Take it. Are you sure? Edwin asked, staring down at the case. I mean, I can't use it, Edwin. I can give it to someone I trust, though. Go to the island. Have your adventure. And we shall be able to write up a great story, even if there isn't anything shady going on. Pegasus isn't allowed cameras on the island, but you can take notes and report about it after the fact, especially if there truly is a King of Games crowned. He grinned and clapped his hand on Edwin's shoulder. And who knows? It might be you. Maybe, Edwin said, thumbing through the cards. I do know at the very least that with this deck, this amazing, powerful deck, I got a shot. Scene break. The deck sucked. I sat on my bed going through the cards and shook my head as I looked over one terrible card after another. Even with Duelist Kingdoms rules, this thing blows. I pulled out one card and made a face in sheer befuddlement. You think I'm going to win with sparks? Seriously. I tossed the card onto the bed and growled, I am so flapping screwed. I stood up and paced, fingers digging into my hair and scratching hard in my scalp, the need to feel a bit of pain to keep me centered, flooding my nerves. I had figured that somehow I'd end up on Duelist Kingdom, as the only other option would have been to start in Season 0. If that was the case, I planned to lay low until the Pharaoh was no longer so murder-happy. Getting a personal invite meant I was to cut the middleman when it came to getting on the island. And from the altered ship card my uncle, whose name I didn't even know because he didn't look like my Uncle Ken, nor was he as much of an ass as the man, had given me, I had a feeling that I wasn't getting a decent room and I would be getting a decent room and wouldn't have to deal with a bunch of kids spending the all night gabbing. I could be a night owl when it called for it, but I much preferred to get my 8 hours of sleep. From what I remembered from the show, the sun rose just as Duelist Kingdom was spotted. I'd gotten the information Weevil did about the field zones, but that didn't matter because I knew that even out the rulebook and with the hunters and whatever else Pegasus was going to be sending to try and keep players out, it was going to be difficult. Not going to win the tournament, I muttered to myself. Wait, no, I could win the tournament, but I can't. Yugi has to win. Unless I really want to screw with Cannon and leave the world doomed to Zork. I paused, mentally wondering if I took the damn puzzle and just encased it in concrete and dumped it in the ocean, if that would solve all our problems. Probably not. The Millennium Ring had the odd ability to always return to Bakura, and I was willing to bet that while we'd never seen the puzzle do that, it would return to Yugi if I shoved it on the same rocket that Jaden had put the Neo's drawing on. So, Yugi has to win the whole damn thing. But that does not mean I have to go out like a buttercup. I shuddered in frustration. I'm going to find those Viva Pinata making blue chips and shove my foot up their atolls. Staring out the window, I began to think things through, puzzling out the tournament and how it had worked. There are 4 finalists that move on from the main battles on the island. Except what about Kaiba? I mean, he demanded to face Pegasus and got in. But why didn't Pegasus make him battle everyone else? Because there were only 5 people? No, that doesn't make sense. That isn't like Pegasus. He loves mind games and screwing with people. Force Joey and Kaiba to duel each other, knowing that each one of them is fighting for a loved one. Sick son of a bitch would get off on that. He made Kaiba get those star chips to get into the castle in the first place. Why not make him go the entire way and compete in the mini-tournament? I walked back to my bed where all the information Pegasus had sent my uncle was spread out and picked up the thick rule book describing the setup of the tournament, flipping through it until, after almost 10 minutes, I found what I was looking for. Duelists will face each other across the island. 10 star chips to enter the castle. Wait a minute. The first person to officially enter the castle's tournament hall will receive the right of challenge. They may claim both prizes. The next 4 rivals will compete to determine who received the second right of challenge. Should both challengers defeat Mr. Pegasus, there'll be a final face-off. Shit, that's how it happened. Kaiba could have claimed the money for the entire thing, but Pegasus didn't tell him. And I bet Yugi and everyone else never bothered to read this. Bandit Keith clearly didn't, because he would have just hung around and didn't enter the castle's main tournament hall. Neither did Mai or Joey or Yugi. And even if Kaiba could have, he wouldn't have taken it. Jeez. Pegasus was probably laughing his pink-suited ass off, thinking that no one knew how important it was to get in first. Setting the letter down, I began to pace. Okay, so there's technically 5 spots, but there isn't a limit that I can remember for guests. Tristan, Taya, and Bakura were all able to watch, and they didn't even compete. Most people didn't make it in to claim a spot in time. I went over to the small dresser next to the bed and pulled out a sheet of paper and began to do the math. Of the 5 people who entered, 3 of them started with 2 star chips. So 2 had to get 10 total and 3 had to get 8, which means there were 44 star chips in the castle that had to be won. Divide that by 2 means that 22 other duelists were completely wiped out in order for them to make it. I frowned and shut my eyes, trying to visualize the crowd that had been around Yugi when he had first arrived at the boat. I didn't know if the hunters, or whatever the Paradox brothers, Panic, or that creepy clown guy were called, had been given star chips or their own. Probably they had been given some, or else there would have been nothing won by facing them. I knew that people in this world, from casual player to the biggest of big bads, seemed honor-bound to accept any challenge. But one could run if they were challenged by a hunter, though? Wouldn't it make it easier to get people to take them out by offering to double their winnings? Still, I decided not to include them in my math. I was pretty sure that there were more than 22 duelists in Duelist Kingdom, which meant that if I played it right, I could get 10 star chips on my own and make it into the castle to at least watch the matches without needing to befriend one of the finalists to get invited. I stared down at the monster card, dark gray, and scowled. But not with this slippy deck. Deciding that I needed to add a few more card shops to my list of what I was going to be doing that next day to try and augment my deck on my uncle's dime, as he had already handed me my credit card to spend on supplies that came from his bank account. I began to pick up the cards, only to pause when I noticed a couple that I had missed at the very bottom of the box my uncle had given me, having been preoccupied with the garbage. Crusader of Endinimon, Breaker the Magical Warrior, Defender the Magical Warrior. I stopped as I came to the final card, Endinimon, the Master of Magic. The first effect won't work because I don't have the field spell. Not that it matters, because thanks to Duelist Kingdom rules, I can just summon him right off the bat. Second effect is also out. But being able to discard a spell card to destroy any card on the field? I felt a wicked grin form on my lips. Duelist Kingdom was known for very few cards that could destroy spells and traps. Heck, Toon World had given Yugi and Kaiba a massive headache, with the latter never even figuring out how to deal with it. But with Endinimon, even without his effect, I had something that had just given me a huge edge when it came to the other shit in my uncle's deck. Letting out a little laugh, I reached into the box and plucked out the card. A thrum ran up my arm, into my very soul. I dropped the card and panted, my arm having jerked back while my other hand dropped into the box on the bed. I stared at Endinimon, the card just lying there. No sparks of magic, no otherworldly cries or calls. Just a card. Swallowing, I reached out and touched it again. A thrum filled me. This time I didn't jolt back. Instead, I forced myself to stay still, not to shiver or shake. I carefully lifted the card up, and the energy that seemed to be rushing through my body slowly became nothing more than a warm feeling, like a bowl of soup after being out in a cold day. It swirled in me, curled up, and nestled in my chest, and I felt confidence and strength, the likes of which I had never felt before. Every duelist had a signature card. Yugi had the Dark Magician. Kaiba had the Blue Eyes White Dragon. Joey had his Red Eyes. Jaden and Neo's. Zane and the Cyber Dragons. Yusei and the Stardust Dragon. On and on. Heroes, villains, the ones that truly mattered, had one card that they fell back on again and again. You aren't my uncles anymore, are you? I whispered to the card. You're mine. The energy in my chest roared in agreement. The heart of the cards. Damn. Scene break. My Valentine looked over the selection of tents carefully, stroking her cheek with one long, elegant finger. Decisions, decisions. This one is smaller but has higher waterproof rating, Miss Valentine. A teen with a squeaky voice and a jittery way about him managed to get out. It was a wonder he could even talk to her, the way he was becoming tongue-tied just staring at her. It's certified to survive winds up to 50 kilometers per hour, 50 kilometers per hour, and handle a downpour of over an inch of rain. That would come in handy, she said to herself. I am going to be out in some wooded island, and if I have to rough it, I would prefer to be as comfortable as I can be. The clerk opened his mouth to speak, but she held up a hand. Give me a moment to think. Of course, the clerk stammered just before the bell over the door chimed, and he turned to greet the new arrival. Hello there, how might I help you? Hi, the man said pleasantly. Going on a trip and going to need some supplies for at least 2 days. Tent, sleeping bag, camp stove. You have any solar lights I can hang? Oh, solar batteries too, with an adapter. Well, yes, sir, we have all of that. The lights are over there, and we keep the solar batteries in the back. I can get them for you. Thanks. I'll just look around. Appreciated. The clerk scurried off, and the new arrival moved to stand next to Mai. She glanced at him, and the main thing that she noticed was how tall he was. She was used to towering over most men, as it seemed like duel monsters tended to attract the shorties. Rex Raptor, Weevil Underwood, just to name a few. Scrawny runts who spent all their time looking at her boobs rather than her face. But this new arrival actually forced her to glance up. A bit of a schlub in her opinion, as he was dressed in jeans, a gray hoodie, and a dark blue baseball cap with a stylized D on it. Not really a slob, just a schlub. Just casual. A suit would do marvels on him. Any suggestions? He asked. The clerk was saying that this one is rated for hurricanes. The man grimaced. I can afford a car to drive away from a hurricane with how much that thing costs. Better to be protected, Mai said. The newcomer scoffed. I checked the weather. It's going to be dry as a bone where I'm going. Just as cold at night. That's the problem. I'd rather save my money. And just where are you going? Mai asked, turning and finally facing him. You're packing for quite a trip. Some island in the Pacific, Duel Monsters tournament. Mai was surprised at that before grinning to herself. Another duelist brought in by Pegasus, and one she'd never seen before. She tried to stay up to date on all the power players in Duel Monsters, so she knew just how to deal with them. Which ones were brainless dolts who thought only with their hormones, the ones that could be easily tricked, the ones that were cold customers and needed to see not the sultry seducer, but the fierce warrior that she could be. This one, though, he was a rogue, a wild card in the deck, and Mai wasn't about to go without some information about him. Duelist Kingdom, I'm competing too, she said, adding a little bit more bubbly charm to her voice than she normally used. Oh, what a small world! Ain't it? The guy said with a smile. My Valentine. Oh, it will be so nice to know that someone else is there when I get to the boat tomorrow. She gussed out the last few words before she offered her hand to him. Edwin Chaos, the newcomer said, accepting her hand in his own. Mai held it for a moment longer than needed, running her finger along his wrist. He tensed for a moment, and she grinned, cooing, Chaos? Oh, that's an unusual name. Can't blame anyone else. I chose it, he said, with a scoffing chuckle before letting go of her hand. He was clearly a touch flustered by her advances, but he hadn't been reduced to a whimpering puddle like the clerk had been. So, I think you and I might be the only two actually preparing for this thing. I ran into someone else, and they were more concerned with the tournament itself than rather what they'd have to go through. Mai nodded at that, using her cooing baby doll voice. Oh, yes. I just really hate all that icky dirt and cold ground. And it helps that everyone else will be tired and sore when they wake up and will be well rested, Edwin answered back, finally moving and selecting a tent that was waterproof, far bigger than the one the clerk had claimed would weather a monsoon, even if it's just for one night. That is so true! My gosh, you are so smart! Smarter than most people you deal with, apparently, he said dryly. Mai blinked at that and he wagged his eyebrows. Seriously, do people actually fall for that simpering girly girl routine? The vocal fry and the cutesy talk? Mai instantly dropped the act. Usually. Not you? Reverse. It annoys the hell out of me. I prefer my women to be smart. Is that so? Mai asked, as he turned to the clerk, who finally reappeared with some solar batteries and a large portable charger one could wear. Smart. She could work with that. Yeah, I'd rather not have my kids be drooling idiots. Grabbing a dark green cart, he began to stock up on supplies. A camp stove that could run off a battery, the same with the lights, and after a moment, a large thermos. He finally stopped at the coolers, rubbing his chin as he looked them all over. Worried about the prices? Mai asked, finding Edwin Chaos to be a rather odd man. He was polite enough, but he also seemed a bit reserved, stuck in his own head. And after breaking her little scheme to play the ditz, he turned on his heel and walked away. She wasn't used to that. With the prize money, you could pay back anything you owe. I don't go in debt. Never have, never will. Besides, that prize money only goes to one person. And I'd rather keep things under control. That way I'm not cursing myself if I get booted off the island the first few hours. Already assuming you're going to lose, Mai asked, picking up a canteen and deciding to add it to her own purchases, tossing it to the clerk who was standing nearby to carry her next order. The same tent as Mr. Chaos here. I just always assume I'm going to lose, Edwin stated, finally picking up a cooler that was a bit bigger than a toaster. Now, go with water and preserve stuff. He pulled the stove out of his cart and walked back over to where he had gotten it, placing it on the shelf. Anyway, I always assume I'm going to lose because then I'm never disappointed. Plan for the worst and all that rot. Maybe, but I prefer to have confidence in myself, Mai said, zeroing in on a portable shower while Edwin looked over sleeping bags, grabbing one and an inflatable pillow. Oh, I have confidence in myself. I just always assume that life is going to kick me in the baby dolls. Mai turned and stared at him, and Edwin himself had an odd look on his face, as if he didn't quite know why he'd said that. He shook his head and went back to shopping. My point is, I'm not going to spend money I don't need to, and I still have more things to get. Like what? Mai asked, deciding to mentally take notes. Edwin seemed to be on the same brain waves as her. She was interested to see if he had any ideas she hadn't considered. She could always improve upon to one-up him. Suitcase with wheels for one, he said. Thick ones with good treads, large enough to store everything so I could just have to drag it around rather than carry it on my back. I thought of the rump stack she'd picked out, quickly decided to return at that and get something like he was describing. It was a good point. New clothing, too. Waterproof shoes, gloves. Got to be comfortable. Good, Mai said, glancing him once over. I was afraid you'd wear something like that. When he gave her a flat look, she smirked. Half of dueling is giving it an imperfect impression. A style, an attitude. We are performers, after all. Right. But you also need to be comfortable if you're going to be mucking about a wild forest on an island in the Pacific. He waved his hand about as he grabbed a roll of biodegradable toilet paper. Have to think about colors. Too dark and I'll roast in the sun, but also need to have enough clothes for all weathers, warm or cold. I need to break my hiking boots in, too. Wouldn't do to get blisters. Probably walk around today to make sure I get used to them. I considered that. She'd been planning to go with her standing dueling outfit. White corset-style top, boots, a matching purple jacket, and short skirt. Perfect for teasing the boys and getting them all flustered into making their mistakes. But trekking about an island... Edwin had the right of that, and Mai made a mental note to grab some extra clothing, just in case. Still bring her fancy stuff, but otherwise she'd be ready for a serious workout. Batteries will cover my lights, so my camping spot will be well lit, and it will power my phone. Need to pick out some books, too. Mai laughed at that. Honey, if you think you have time to read, you think duels are going to happen when the sun goes down? Edwin asked. Or what about when you're trying to eat? He shook his head. I don't do well when I'm bored. I get annoyed. My brain is like a sword, and it needs a whetstone to keep it sharp. He moved to the register and began to lay out his purchases. Still need food, too. Doubt Pegasus is going to have hamburgers and hot dogs waiting about. Granola bars would be the smartest. You're really thinking this through, aren't you? Mai asked, trying to get him to actually talk to her. It was annoying her how he would converse with her, only turn back to his shopping. She had to admit he was thinking more about it than most people did. She chatted with a few people, and they seemed to believe that this would be some sort of resort vacation. Some, like Mako Tsunami, could handle roughing it, but Weevil Underwood? If he didn't win before nightfall, the little vermin was going to die before the sun rose. Edwin Chaos, though. He was plotting, and that made her a touch nervous. Because if he thought this many steps ahead for just how he would sleep, then what was he going to be like in a duel? She needed more info. I overplan, overthink. Used to call myself a realist until that became the go-to word for smug jerks. He pulled out a credit card as the clerk rang up his order. And what do you call yourself now? An overthinker with an overhyped active imagination and a rare blend of God complex and inferiority complex? He paused. That doesn't roll off the tongue, now does it? It doesn't. But aren't you forgetting something? Mai asked as Edwin swiped his card. What would that be? He asked, leaning down to sign the receipt. Your deck, Mai pointed out as he moved out of the way so she could ring up her purchases. Don't tell me you are thinking that it's all set. Some might try and claim their decks are perfect, but there's always room to improve. No, that's right, Edwin admitted. I need to hit the card shops and see if there's anything good. Stuffing his purchases into the suitcase he'd purchased, he zipped the whole thing up before giving Mai a mock salute. See ya. Mai quickly thrust some money at the clerk before grabbing her own bags, bobbling the tent a bit before she hurried after Edwin, the man having already made it to the crosswalk by the time she left the store. She hadn't gotten anything out of him about his dueling style or how his deck was set up. She'd been so focused on what he was buying that she'd forgotten that in the end it didn't matter how prepared he was if she sent him packing the first day. Wait! Edwin, to his credit, did come to a stop, letting Mai catch up. You walk fast, she said, panting a touch. I have these long dancer legs, he jested. What's up? You were nice enough to offer me suggestions on what to get in there. Let's shop together a bit more, help each other out. Edwin considered this before nodding. Works for me, but no rolling your eyes or making sarcastic comments if I stop to admire some action figure or a comic book. I wouldn't dream of it, Mai said, mentally rolling her eyes, though. No matter how old they got, some men were just boys. I know a place where we can go that's right near here, she suggested, and Edwin motioned for her to lead on. Anything in particular you need help looking for? Not really, Edwin said, not offering up any info. Just need to see what they have. Oh, they have lots of stuff, Mai said. Fiends, winged beasts, fish, aqua monsters? She kept glancing at Edwin, but his face betrayed nothing. Utterly neutral, to the point that one would have thought that he was in a bad mood if it weren't for the occasional smirk that he flashed her way, or the twinkle in his eye. So, what do you do when you're not playing Duel Monsters? She asked as they waited at the crosswalk. Edwin staring forward and bouncing on his heels. He glanced at her from the corner of the eye. Is that even allowed? To have interest outside of the game? I got the impression that everyone in this town played the game, and it was the only thing that mattered. I chuckled at that. Yes, it does seem like some people become obsessed. Weevil Underwood? Weevil Underwood. The light switched, and the two of them made their way across the street, Mai steering him towards the Nusing card shop, one of her preferred places to hunt for new cards. Not as big as some of the more popular card shops in Domino. That also meant it wasn't crowded, which was a plus for Mai when she felt like actually being treated like a person rather than an object of lust. It also happened to be surrounded by wonderful clothing stores, one of her favorite restaurants, too, meaning she could easily take her time and make a day out of shopping and not need to leave the same block. So is that a stage name, or was his parents actually cruel? Edwin asked. I'm honestly not sure. If it was a stage name, now he's made it his real name. Edwin whistled, or tried to. It all kind of petered out halfway through. I don't think there's anything I would love more that would get me to change my name just to make it a silly pun. And what would your name be if you did change it? Probably You're Fishing, Mai. Stop it. He shot her a dry look, and Mai's eyes went wide before she smiled weakly, though the grin was a bit more of a grimace at being caught. Listen, I'm just trying to get an advantage. I get it. After all, I know your shtick, so you want to know mine. My shtick? She asked, making a face at the word choice. Oh, I don't know, Harpy's Lady Deck focusing on quick swarming, Edwin said with a shrug before locking eyes with her. You don't have to be so sneaky and cutthroat about things. Believe it or not, there are some people in this world who aren't ice holes. Again he paused, his features going sour before he shook his head. You want to know what my deck is, you just gotta ask. Word of advice? Mai said with a scoff. Don't offer such information for free. Word of advice? He echoed. If you're going to be a good duelist, it won't matter. Oh, and try not being rude to people who are just trying to be friendly. Why throw a punch when a tap on the shoulder will do? Why threaten when a kind word will get the same result? Consider that. Being a condescending birch isn't a good look for you. With that he turned and began to walk away again, and Mai felt a small stab of guilt. Life had taught her to be hard, to be distrustful, and to always look out for number one. But he was right that there were ways to do that, and ways not to. And Edwin Chaos, while being far too trusting, didn't seem like a bad person. Not like Rex or Weevil or Kaiba, just naive. "Wait!" Mai called out, giving chase. "Wait!" For a moment she feared he would keep walking, but after a moment Edwin stopped so she could catch up. "I'm sorry." Edwin merely nodded. "So this card shop?" "Almost there," she said, taking back her lead role. "Well?" "Well, what?" "Your deck." "Oh, no, you don't find out that easily. You gotta ask properly." Mai rolled her eyes. "Okay, tell me." Edwin let out a scoffing laugh. "No, that's not going to do it at all. You need to say, 'Mr. Chaos, will you tell me what kind of deck you're running, please?' The Mr. part is important. Shows respect." "Really?" Mai asked, raising an eyebrow. "No." He paused before adding, "Now you have to say, 'Mr. Chaos, will you please tell me what kind of deck you are running, pretty please?'" "That's even worse!" Mai exclaimed. "I am not saying that." "Well, now you can have to add with a cherry on top at the end. You aren't serious." "Deadly," Edwin said with a wide, wicked grin. "Come on, Mai. You've been here long enough. I got bills to pay, I got mouths to feed. Ain't nothing in this world for free." He sang the last part. "You want something from me? You pay." "Then I'll find out on my own," Mai said hotly, "because I'm not going to embarrass myself like that." "Why not? I embarrass myself all the time." "This it?" The blonde bombshell looked up and realized that they were standing in front of the card shop. "Yeah," she said, deciding not to give in to her urges to storm away from the infuriating man. Instead, go back to her original plan of observing him. Edwin stepped in and began to look around, surprising Mai by not making a beeline right for the cases full of cards, but instead looking at the racks of magazines and the shelves lined with toys. The clerk said hello, and Edwin nodded, but refused the offer of help, wandering about seemingly with no strategy or pattern. Mai resisted the urge to tap her foot and sigh until he finally got to the cards. She didn't know if he realized what he was doing, but either way, it was driving her nearly batty. Finally, he moved to the glass display counter and glanced at the cards, sometimes squatting down to get a better look, other times bending over to look through the top of the case. What truly frustrated Mai, though, was the fact that he didn't seem to ever truly look at one particular card. For a moment, she thought he was a machine monster user because he asked a question about some metal bug monster. But then he moved on and looked at some warrior card. "Anything of interest?" she asked, walking over and leaning down so her breasts were near his face. Edwin glanced at her, and for a moment she thought she had him, only for him to turn away. "I assume you're talking about the cards," he snarked. "Couple. Do you own Cyber Shield? They have a copy if you don't." Wait, they do?" Edwin pointed at the case, and Mai instantly forgot about grilling the man and instead focused on the card. "Oh, that would be perfect, and it's on sale, too. Darren," she waved the owner over, "how much for this card?" 1,680 yen, Darren, a thin man with thick, black-rimmed glasses and a bowl-cut haircut, told her. "Bought," she said quickly. "That will... Edwin?" She looked around only to find that he had moved on to the main case in the shop, one that held the most costly of cards. Edwin pulled out a notebook and was tapping a pen against it as he stared at one of the shelves. "What did you find?" "Exodia set," he said, pointing to 5 cards. "What are the cost of these, sir?" Darren walked over, handing Mai her card in a hard case. "I'll charge that to your account, Miss Valentine. What card, sir?" "The Exodia set. The full set runs 30,000 yen." Edwin nodded at that, and Mai's mind boggled at the price. "I'm sorry, I misspoke. 300,000 yen." Molly's mind went even more erratic at that. Her entire deck didn't cost that much. And while Exodia was powerful, no one had managed to summon it, as far as she knew at least. And each piece, I'm selling it as a full set, Darren said, shaking his head. But if you were, just curious. 55,000, but again, and if someone were to want to sell pieces, what would you pay? 50,000 yen? 45,000. Edwin shook his head. Maybe. You have pieces of Exodia? Mai asked, startled. And you want to sell them? No, just curious. He pointed at a card right below the Exodia set. What about that one? Mai blinked. The Dark Magician Girl. 17,000, sir. No way. 11,200. Darren let out a laugh at that. Now you're the one being unreasonable. I don't think so, Edwin countered. That card is strong, yes, but most people won't use it because its effect isn't worth it without the Dark Magician, and those things are rarer than Exodia. Besides, there are cheaper cards to have for brute force. You have it marked up for rarity, but that demand is small. What good is a rare card if no one's going to buy it? It's useless unless someone wants it. And with how you have it priced, you haven't found anything of value that you would have it wasting space like that. Darren blustered before rallying. 1,600, 500 then. Don't waste my time. 12,700. The shop owner narrowed his eyes. 1,600,000. Now you just went really up. 16,000, the man said, correcting himself. Mai marveled as Edwin's eyes flashed. She'd seen that look before on Card Sharks, back when she'd been the dealer on the casino boat. She was real good at winning for the house, and thus netting herself a nice bonus, and knew how to string people along who got on hot streaks until their luck changed and they suddenly went cold. But when she saw that look Edwin was sending Darren, she always knew that that kind of look meant it was time to ask for a break, let some other fool be the dealer, because they knew how to play the game and win. Let me ask you something. What is worth more to you? The money you will make now, or the money you may make a year down the road? Because I can promise you this. You are not selling that card anytime soon. And that's assuming that you get lucky and Industrial Illusions doesn't do a reprint. I've heard rumors they're thinking of doing just that with some cards. People are complaining that they want to have the cards of their idols, but they can't get a hold of them. You think that a card will hold value, but it all takes a rumor, and then suddenly the price goes spiraling down. He walked over to another case and began to point out cards. Steel Scorpion, 1,670. Neo the Magical Swordsman, 2,810. Armed Ninja, 1,200. Mystical Space Typhoon, 3,340. That right there is more than what I'm asking for you to knock off the Dark Magician Girl. I want those cards, but I'm willing to walk away now, along with what I'm willing to spend on the Dark Magician. Now, I know for a fact there are at least 5 other card shops within walking distance. I only came here because Mai suggested it. It might take all day, but I will find all 4 of those cards, minus the Dark Magician Girl. But I promise there won't be anyone that comes in today willing to drop that much money, maybe all week. Do the math here, Darren, and be smart. Darren, though, shook his head. I'm not. What about a duel? Mai said quickly. Edwin shot her a look and she smiled. Edwin wins and he gets his discounts. You win and he pays full. The shopkeep poked at the inside of his cheek before shaking his head. If he's with you, Mai, then he's at least halfway decent duelist. That's a gamble I'm going to lose. Then we do first blood, Edwin suggested. When the 2 of them looked at him, he held out his arms. We play until the first person damages the other person's life points. Doesn't matter how much, just first damage scores the win. No putting monsters in defense either. We draw until someone wins. I don't know, Darren began, only for Mai to hold up her hand. Let me talk with him for a moment, Edwin, she said, her shopping companion nodding before he pulled out a notebook and began to scribble more things down. Pulling the shop owner aside, Mai hissed, I'll cover half of the expense if if he wins. What? He and I are both going to the same tournament, and I'm trying to figure out what deck he uses. You duel him, and I will cover half the cost if you lose. But I'll still be... It's 3,400 yen, Mai complained. You are willing to reduce it by half of that amount, and he's right that you don't have any takers for that card. When is the last time you heard someone using a dark magician? Besides, just stack your deck with powerful monsters and demand to go second. You just need to get one hit in. Darren thought that over before nodding. All right. And I'm charging your half directly to your account, Mai. You don't trust me? Not as far as I can throw you, Darren said, calling out to Edwin. All right, you have yourself a deal. Tucking his notebook back in his pocket, Edwin opened his deck box and pulled out his cards. It took Darren several minutes, as he said he needed to run back to get his deck. But Mai knew that he was really going through his inventory and pulling his strongest monsters out so that his deck was stacked with bruisers. Edwin merely waited, looking about like a child told to wait for his mommy while she tried on a shirt in the fitting room. Finally, Darren returned, and Edwin held out his deck for his opponent to shuffle. The owner of the store cleared off space by the register and moved to stand behind the counter while Edwin stood on the other side. So, who goes first? You made the challenge, so I get second turn. Fair enough, Edwin said, drawing his card while Mai moved to stand between them. She rubbed her fingers together, gleeful that she'd finally... I play Sparks. 200 of your life points. I win. What? Mai said flatly. Oh, I'm sorry. I forgot I'm supposed to explain what every card does. Sparks allows me to do 200 points of damage to your life points directly. Now, due to the rules... Alright, so that is the Dark Magician Girl, Steel Scorpion, Neo, Armed Ninja, and Mystical Space Typhoon. I'll also be wanting a receipt. Mai could only stare in stunned silence as Darren grumbled about Edwin's purchases, trying to work out how the blonde man had managed to take her carefully made plan and shred it into confetti. She was so befuddled that it took the man tapping her on the shoulder and nodding towards the door before she finally snapped out of her stupor and followed him out. Well, that was nice, but I have a bad feeling he might not let me come back again, Edwin said, rocking back and forth on his heels as they waited for the crosswalk light to change. I'll talk to him about it, Mai said before glancing at Edwin, something clicking in her head. So, no need for me to say pretty please? I think you just did, Edwin pointed out, but Mai scowled as he held up his hands. Kidding. The light turned and they began to cross the road, Mai having to hurry to keep up with his long strides. What do you mean? I know what kind of deck you run. You caught me. It's a deck made entirely out of sparks. No, Mai said dryly. You use the Dark Magician. Oh? Why else would you spend so much money on the Dark Magician Girl if you don't have the Dark Magician? Edwin smirked. Swing and a miss, Mai. Nice try. I need to get some food now, granola bars and such. Okay, let's say you don't own the Dark Magician. Why'd you buy the card then? Why blow so much money on it? Edwin pursed his lips, clearly considering why Mai had said that, and just when she was thinking he was going to admit that she had nailed it on the head, and he was focused on the Dark Magician, he asked, You ever hear of Yugi Moto? Mai glanced at him as he pulled out his phone, checking for directions, and then made a right. Should I have? He defeated Seto Kaiba. She blinked in surprise at that. Seto Kaiba? The so-called best duelist in the world? So-called because you haven't faced him? Edwin teased. Yeah, that would be him. This Yugi Moto defeated Seto Kaiba? Yep, he said, popping the P at the end. Ask your sources if you don't believe me. And don't try and deny it. I know you have sources. A woman like you wouldn't. Mai was surprised once more at how intuitive Edwin Chaos was. Many of the professional duelists had begun forming networks of people to pass along information. She had people like Darren to keep out an eye for cards, and she was going to ask why he hadn't let her know about the cyber armor card sooner. Others on what her rivals and opponents were doing, and still more for rumors about the tournaments and other events. she would have made some quiet inquiries about Yugi Moto to see if what Edwin's saying was true. Now, my sources are telling me that he's attracted Pegasus's attention. The man is rather unhealthy in his obsession when it comes to Seto Kaiba, so someone defeating him is instantly going to get on his radar. Apparently, despite having never competed in a tournament, Moto has been invited to Duelist Kingdom, and he uses the Dark Magician. Mai supplied. Edwin smirked. Doesn't hurt that the card he's really in love with has a partner that I happen to hold. Alliances and allies have been made with less. I said, seeing the logic to that. Not her normal way of handling things, as she tended to go all alone, and if she did have to rely on someone, she liked to make it strictly business. But she could see where Edwin was coming from. So what's your plan? Cozy up to Moto? Not just him, Edwin said. A few other people I have an eye on. I have a card Mako Tsunami might like, and if you hadn't been with me, I probably would have bought cyber armor myself and traded it to you later on. She nodded at that. Edwin Chaos. He was far more cunning than she'd pegged him for. With his sloppy style and casual air, one would think he was a casual duelist. But there was a steel under that smile, and laugh, and a brain that liked to play not just duel monsters, but the interpersonal game. Despite spending an hour with him, she'd learned next to nothing about him. She didn't even know what kind of deck he ran, other than he had sparks of all cards. That wasn't enough to plan ahead with a strategy, or how to beat him. She needed more. Unless you want to watch me shop for snacks, I think this is where we're going to part ways, he said, breaking her from her thoughts. Well, I said, reaching over and walking her fingers along her chest. She couldn't waste time watching him grocery shop, but she wasn't about to let him walk away without him giving her something. Flashing her most smoldering glaze, she stood on her toes and whispered, Maybe you and I could meet for dinner tonight? To celebrate before we head off to Duelist Kingdom? Edwin looked down at her for a moment, before, to her shock, his face became thunderous. He took a step back, making her nearly topple, and folded his arms over her chest. Maybe, if I thought you actually did like me, and it weren't still a trick to get me to reveal what deck I run. Maybe I would have said yes. Not even in a romantic sense, but as a friend, because I get the feeling you really need one, Mai. He ran his fingers through his hair in frustration, asking nicely. That's all I wanted, and you couldn't even do that. He turned and stormed off without another word. Mai just stared at his retreating form, trying to figure out where it had all gone wrong. No one had ever turned her down. No one. She made man putty in her hands all the time, and yet Edwin hadn't merely turned her away. He'd been enraged that she'd attempted to seduce him. Who are you, Edwin Chaos?